Welcome back to the critique. So, we've got this foundational text, essentially 30 principles for improving human relations, influencing people, packed with anecdotes.
Right, the classic framework.
Absolutely. We're jumping straight in on how to sharpen it, maybe for a more contemporary, sophisticated reader.
Okay, let's do it.
So, first up, let's talk about the rhetorical tone. It's got this really high energy, very absolute style, which is great for motivation initially, but does it maybe limit how we see the complexity of human interaction?
Yeah, I see what you mean. That conviction is powerful, no doubt. But there's a potential downside, right?
Uh-huh.
It uses these incredibly definitive statements all the time. Things like the only way under high heaven, or, you can't win an argument, period.
Very black and white.
Exactly. And while that might have been designed for impact, for memorability, today it can come across as, well, a bit dogmatic, maybe even slightly manipulative.
Especially now, audiences expect more transparency, maybe more acknowledgement of nuance.
Precisely. Psychological complexity is sort of expected now.
Okay, but here's the pushback. If we start adding conditions, caveats, don't we risk losing that motivational punch, that intensity that made it such a classic?
That's the tightrope walk, isn't it?
How do we make sure nuance doesn't just dilute the message, make it weaker?
Good question. The suggestion isn't really to ditch the conviction. It's more about reframing some of the big statements, maybe making them more conditional advice,
Okay.
or exploring the limits of these principles. We just need to nod to the fact that, human motives aren't usually just one thing.
Right.
And let's be honest, completely avoiding conflict or never criticizing, that's not always realistic or even ethical in, say, a work context.
True. Sometimes you have to address an issue.
Acknowledging those edge cases actually makes the core advice feel stronger, more grounded.
Okay, so how do we make that actionable, but keep the impact? Let's take principle 1, don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Instead of that absolute ban,
Right.
maybe we add a section, perhaps in the preface or intro notes, that talks about context, defines when criticism is actually useful.
Yes, differentiating destructive condemnation from, necessary, constructive feedback. That's key.
Got it.
Or think about the desire to be important. It's presented as this single driving force behind almost everything.
Yeah, the core motivation.
What if we tweak the language slightly? Frame it as, say, one of the most powerful and least leveraged human drive.
Ooh, I like that. Least leveraged.
It keeps the principle central, acknowledges its power, but also subtly admits other factors exist. It elevates it from just a rule to a more sophisticated observation.
Okay, excellent. A stronger rhetorical base. Now let's shift gears to the practical side, because this is meant to be an action book, right? Forming habits.
Absolutely. So, to really deliver on that promise, it feels like the content needs a more built-in, kind of continuous system for self-analysis, for accountability, that's tied directly to actually using the principles.
Yes, this is a huge opportunity, I think. The material is great at emphasizing doing stuff. Apply the principles, review monthly, keep track of your triumphs.
Right, the success log. But the weakness there, those methods, like the banker's system or the blank pages for wins, they focus almost entirely on the successes.
Okay.
They don't really push the reader to dig into why a principle didn't work in a specific situation, or why it felt so hard to apply, or, what specific things maybe derailed the attempt.
Ah, so you track the win, but you don't really learn from the loss or the near miss.
Exactly. And the analysis of failure or difficulty is where so much of the real learning happens.
Yeah, but okay, let me play devil's advocate again. Implementing structured self-reflection is hard work. If we demand this deeper, maybe failure-focused analysis, won't that add friction? Could it discourage someone who's already finding it tough?
It definitely risks adding a layer of complexity, yes. But the payoff is genuine internalization, not just surface-level application. So the suggestion is to introduce a more structured method for this kind of critical, retrospective self-reflection. Make the feedback loop more formal, more iterative.
Okay. How?
It means getting the reader to really analyze their own motivation in that moment, the specific context they were in, and the actual results, even the counterintuitive ones. It turns practice into a real learning system. Failure becomes data, not just defeat.
Right. Makes sense. It forces you to understand the why behind the principle, not just mimic the action. Give me a concrete example, a tool for this.
Okay, we need to build in structured prompts. Maybe add specific analytical questions right into the notes section for each principle.
Like?
Like, say, after trying principle 3, arouse in the other person an eager want. The reader shouldn't just note, did they cooperate? Yes, no.
Right.
They should also track, what did I initially assume this person wanted versus what did I actually observe them responding to?
Ah, that comparison forces deeper thought.
Exactly. It makes them really engage with that whole Henry Ford idea of seeing things from the other person's perspective, but on a much deeper analytical level. The internal process becomes as important as the external result.
Okay, I really like that. It shifts it from just motivational reading towards genuine skill building, mastery even.
That's the goal.
So if we're asking for that deeper analysis, that reflection on attempts, we should probably also address the sheer number of principles, which brings us to the next point.
The cognitive load, yeah.
And honestly, some structural redundancy among the 30 principles, it kind of dilutes the focus. It could make mastering them harder than it needs to be for someone who's really motivated.
Absolutely. This hits at the core organization and how easy it is to actually remember and integrate this stuff long term.
Yeah.
Think about retention. You've got quite a few principles covering very similar ground, especially around positive reinforcement, boosting ego.
Like which ones?
Well, give honest and sincere appreciation. That's principle 2. Then there's make the other person feel important, principle 6 in part 2. And later on, give a dog a good name, principle 28. They're all tapping into that same fundamental idea, right? Elevating the other person's self-worth.
Okay, yeah, I see the overlap. The anecdotes give them different flavors, sure, but the core concept is similar. The overall structure feels expansive, maybe, rather than tight and focused.
Expansive is a good word. It feels a bit sprawling.
But wait, if the ultimate goal is forming these specific habits, aren't we risking losing some of the original power, the nuance, if we start grouping them? Doesn't that granularity matter?
That's a fair point. The granularity definitely matters in how you apply them in the specific situations, but does it need to matter as much in the initial memory structure?
Okay.
The suggestion here is basically consolidation. Let's group the closely related principles together under broader, more memorable thematic headings.
Ah, like umbrella concepts.
Exactly. It cuts down the total number of things you're trying to juggle mentally, right? But it still allows for exploring those subtle differences in application. They just become subpoints under the main theme, instead of separate top-level principles.
So, structural clarity over sheer volume, at least for getting started and remembering the basics.
I think so. For initial retention and habit formation, yes.
Okay, let's make that specific then. How would you consolidate?
Well, we could start with part 2, the 6 ways to make people like you. That seems like low-hanging fruit.
6 principles just for that?
Right. We could probably condense those into, say, 3 master principles pretty easily. For instance, take principle 1, become genuinely interested in other people, and principle 4, be a good listener, encourage others to talk about themselves.
Okay.
They both revolve around focusing on the other person, right? So maybe combine them under one big idea, centered on attention or inquiry, genuine focus outward.
I like that. Attention and inquiry. Okay, and what about the esteem ones we mentioned?
Yeah, the ones about positive regard. Give honest appreciation, make the other person feel important, give a dog a good name.
Those 3.
We could link those into a single unified principle, maybe call it the principle of esteem and expectation, or something like that.
Principle of esteem and expectation. Yeah, that captures it.
Exactly. And then, within that chapter or section, you break down the specific ways to apply it, through sincere appreciation, making them feel important, setting positive expectations. The original nuances are still there.
But they're organized more logically under a master concept.
Right. It clarifies the big picture, the forest, before the reader gets lost in the details of every single tree. It should make for a much smoother learning curve for forming those core habits.
Okay, these all feel like strong improvements. This material is obviously powerful, truly inspiring for so many people. These suggestions are really about making sure that message stays potent, stays actionable, and feels relevant for, the modern reader who's looking for that self-improvement, that genuine influence.
Absolutely. We covered quite a bit today, all aimed at maximizing the reader's journey with this text and ensuring its legacy continues.
Yeah, so just to recap quickly, we looked at strengthening the rhetoric, essentially allowing for a bit more psychological nuance without losing the core conviction.
Right, adjusting that absolute tone.
Then enhancing the practical application side, creating real tools for ongoing self-reflection, for accountability, especially learning from the times things don't go perfectly.
Turning practice into a proper feedback loop, yeah?
And finally, tackling the structure itself, streamlining those principles, consolidating where there's overlap to make it easier to learn, remember, and actually use them.
Sharper impact through better organization.
So the actionable takeaway is pretty clear. Think about adjusting the tone for nuance, building in those structured self-reflection tools, and consolidating the principles for cognitive efficiency. It's already strong material. These steps just help amplify its power.
Definitely. And we really encourage you to take these ideas, mull them over, refine the material, and absolutely send it back our way for another look. We'd be genuinely excited to see how this evolves.
Yeah, looking forward to it. This is transformative stuff.